Okay, Mr. Acevedo, we are here at your home at 31581 Marbeth Road in Yucaipa, California, 92399. Dr. Anthony Acevedo, World War II vet, who came to my attention through an article by Mark Muckenfuss in the Press Enterprise on Sunday, March 1, 2009. What the archives are interested in, Dr. Acevedo, are mainly in your family, and you have filled out the form. So could you tell us about your family and what your daily life was like?
From my childhood?
Yes, that would be a good place. Do you have any brothers and sisters? What did your parents do?
Well,
How old were you when your parents died? Things like that.
Well, I was born in San Bernardino, California. I lost my mother when I was 1.5 years old. And I saw her when she passed away. I was close to her. But
Was this in San Bernardino?
in San Bernardino.
Uh-huh.
Then when I grew up, about being 4 years old, my father decided to move us out, and we went to Pasadena,
Uh-huh.
California. And my father had met another person, and that person he decided to marry, and her name was Maria Luisa, same as my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a sister named Maria Luisa,
Uh-huh.
and Estela, which she was born later in the years. And as we were there in Pasadena, when I grew up to about the age of about 10 years old, but just before then, I had grown up with my half-cousins, which were related to my stepmother. But I call my stepmother more of a mother because she was more like a real mother to me.
Yes.
The fact is that it was my half-cousin, Ernesto Prieto. We used to go and sell papers, newspapers. On New Year's Day, we'd sell papers when 1 o'clock in the morning, and be out there walking the Colorado Street up to Hill Street.
On Saturdays, no doubt. Saturday nights?
Saturday nights.
Selling the Sunday paper.
You bet.
I remember that too.
And then that was the newspaper was about 10 cents a newspaper.
Yeah.
And we had stacks of newspapers that we'd sell. So that was my life. Grew up collecting bottles here and there to sell. And when suddenly my father was then in Mexico, because being an architectural engineer, jobs weren't too good here probably. I didn't know his lifestyle. He never talked to me, but knowing briefly when at the time he was something that had to do with hydraulic and resources in Mexico. So one time he decided he'd stay over there.
Mm-hmm.
While my mother, my stepmother, and us kids lived with the Prietos, have cousins. Until sometime then, in '37, I noticed my mother was very worried, and I noticed she running about and says, "We have to pack and leave the country." and for some reason that the United States government had expelled him out of the country. So this was the fact that in our lifestyle, whatever, because my mother didn't have a job, and my father wasn't present because he didn't have a job here in the United States. He was laid off from the Alger Company. He used to work for the Alger Company.
What year was this? Do you remember?
37.
In 1937.
1937.
This is when American-born Mexicanos were also sent back to Mexico.
Sent back to Mexico.
Yes, I think there's a documentary about that.
Yes, and we were naturally, what would you say, kicked out of the United States.
Yes, that was awful.
And my mother started to pack all our furniture and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we wound up in Durango, Mexico.
So you grew up in Mexico?
I grew up, I went to school at the Prevocacional, and I studied, I went through the course of studies. They used to call me the gringo. So I didn't know Spanish as bad as I knew English. I mean, you started at that age, you started to grow up to learn one thing or the other.
Did you grow up speaking Spanish?
I finally was able to learn the Spanish, and I was teaching the students and the boys and fellas in school the English. So I used to help the teacher with the English.
Yes.
And
But
so,
did you learn English here in this country? Or did
Oh,
you
yes.
grow up speaking Spanish?
Yes. In the schools here in Pasadena, we could not associate with Americans. We had to go to a school where our school there in Lamanda Park, we used to call a little town off of Pasadena, east of Pasadena, Lamanda Park, Chihuahuita. There was a school called Fremont Elementary School, and that school was only meant that Mexican Americans were to attend, no Americans. We could not mix with Americans until we graduated from the 6th grade. Then, when we went to Woodrow Wilson Junior High.
In junior high school.
Junior high school. And so we could not attend to any other schools but that, and then we could not go to swimming pools unless we were just only Mexican Americans on one side, blacks on one other side, and whites on the other side. And that was at Brookside Park in Pasadena, near the Rose Bowl.
So you went to a segregated school.
Yes.
There was one school in Austin, Texas, where I'm from, Zavala School. And a lot of the Mexicanos who went there were Barrio Chicanos, and they were punished for speaking Spanish on the school playground. And they were made to write on the board 100 times, "I will not speak Spanish at school," and their mouth was washed out with soap and water. Did that happen to you?
It didn't get to that point because we were very limited. And my stepmother kept very close to us. We lived in that little barrio with no sidewalks, no pavement, just a dirt road, and just enough to provide ourselves whatever we could.
And what's there now?
It's still there. Now there's streets, but no sidewalks.
No sidewalk.
No, but just reminds us the houses were improved, rebuilt, but just a remembrance of that place. It's still there. I have some cousins that live there that grew up. But anyway, when we were sent to Mexico, then that's what my father was a director of public works for the state, assigned to in Durango, and he had his backups with a general, and so he had big power. but my father was a very type of person, very strict, very cold.
Not very demonstrative.
Very, I didn't think he was my father,
Mm-hmm.
but that was his style of the way we grew up in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So I was afraid to talk to him. I got to the point where if I'd stutter. I still stutter a little bit, but I mean I used to stutter quite a bit to a point that he'd slap my face because I wouldn't talk clearly. And so he told me, face the mirror and learn to talk front of the mirror. He used to tell me. And I couldn't, I was afraid. So he would stand me up in a corner and punish me in the corner of the walls. And for 2-3 hours standing there and as a punishment. That was his way of treating me.
So in 1937 you were in Mexico.
In 1937 I was in Mexico.
For how long?
Durango.
For how long?
Until I grew up to be 17 and a half years old. During that time, while he was a director of public works, I grew up to more, and until one time, which I'll show you later, he built, during that time, in this, just the early 40s, just before the war was going to start, he built the Olympic swimming pool because Mexico was in the the Olympics in the early 44, 41, or something like that. And he built a big Olympic swimming pool for the Olympics. And so one day, my buddies, we used to call it the Three Musketeers. Jose Blanco, Antonio Carrola, son of a senator, and Jose Blanco was the nephew of a railroad conductor, and myself. And we used to go early in the morning before going to class. Excuse me. About 5 in the morning, we'd head for the swimming pool. And they used to call it Atlas. They used to call me Atlas, but the Three Musketeers. And that day we were out there with swimming. You could see the little mist on the swimming pool. And it was 100 feet by 100 by 50. The big swimming pools. And we were out there swimming, and the water was nice. And my buddy hears a da 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 a Morse code, and he says, "Atlas," he whispered. He says, "There's a spies going on." Alongside of the swimming pool, close by, about 5 feet away from the pool, was a transmitter, radio transmitter that was used to transmit music for the proms, when people would be walking out there for music. Well, for some reason we heard, and he says that there were submarines in Baja California. So these radio operators were radio operators that worked under my father. So we dashed out of there, and we dressed up to go to the class, and I said, cover me up for the class, and I'm going to go to my father's office. And so I went up to my father's office, and I told him, says, two of your employees, radio operators, were doing some communication with German submarines in Baja California. It opened his eyes up, and he says, let me take you to class. I said, I'll go. So, okay. I went, straight my class, and I talked about it with the rest of the fellows, and then they were arrested, and
They were Germans.
they were Mexicans communicating with the Germans in Baja California. So, okay, we'll leave that there now.
Yes.
And so the Mexican American consulate was after me, updating me on the dates that I was supposed to leave for the United States to join the army. So came the day, my parents were aware of it, so I said goodbye, and I came back to Pasadena, which I'll show you the pictures of my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And we, I immediately registered, I was inducted, and I was sent to Campadere, Oregon, by way of MacArthur, where I was registered at, Camp MacArthur. And I wound up in Campadere, Oregon, with the 70th Infantry Division. By that time, my father had given me some references as a backup to see if they would let me go into the medical situation, because I wanted to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got backed up by the governor of the state of Durango, El General Elpidio G. Velázquez, and
Elpidio
Elpidio G. Velázquez, the General. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No.
Yeah, he was quite a guy, and very good friend of my father's. He always asked my father for advice. My father always gave him the best, because part of my father built the Pan American Highway, the one that leads from El Paso all the way to South America.
So in Mexico you had connections
Yes,
by
very
way
much.
of your father.
Yeah. So the letters referenced requesting the army, the government, that please give, we wish you to thank you, and my son is to be in the medical if it's
Corps.
possible. So I was in the infantry, and I was training and bivouacking, and while I was just lying down there in the breeze at night, and when a jeep came into the camp, and there were lights on. Suddenly I get this is Private Anthony Acevedo, front center, and I got up quick. My buddies got me and said, "Hey, they want you over there. What are you doing? Be careful." And I said, "Well, I don't know what's happening." So I went up there and says, "You have been transferred to the medical corps." And then I was transferred immediately to the medical corps, and a week later I was sent to medical school, which medical school was from Oregon. I wound up in O'Reilly General Hospital in Springfield, Missouri.
How long did you go to medical school?
We went there for about 6 months, equivalent to almost a 3 or 4 year medical training for
Amazing.
medical and surgical technician, to operate in the field, surgery and all that. And
Did you get a medical degree from that?
no, they didn't give you degrees in the.
Did you go to medical school afterward?
I intended, I went to, and when my ex-wife, didn't want me to be a doctor, I had 8 months to finish in my medical.
Oh.
I had already gone through the whole system, and I went to part of UCLA, and I went to osteopath school of osteopathy to learn many techniques of the bones.
Yes.
And chiropractic too, and that's when I almost finished, and I wasn't able to make it. I mean, she wouldn't want to let me, and since I knew the art and designing I became a designer, and I went into aerospace design engineering.
You know, I I loved anatomy. I learned to draw from comic books at the age of 5, Superman, Captain Marvel, and so on.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed with the anatomy. I learned how to draw from the comic books. And then when I was in high school, I also wanted to go to medical school. And I wanted to learn more about anatomy, so I took physiology classes. But if it hadn't been for my art, I would have gone to medical school.
Yeah, I did everything in artwork in medical
Yeah,
school.
that's good.
That they even asked me to do the drawings for the fellows and students.
Uh-huh.
See, as you go to the hallway here,
Yes.
when you turn just to your left side on the wall, there's the Cathedral of Reims, France.
Uh-huh.
I drew that up.
Oh,
I don't know if you've seen it, but
no.
if you want to see it.
I'll take a look at it, yes. And then we'll take a picture of it later on. I see, yeah. Oh, that's very impressive. Wonderful. Reims.
Yeah, I won a prize on that. And when they saw that, when I went to school, I mean, yeah, I was going to school. I got a prize, first prize, and the head of the design systems at Howard Hughes aircraft.
Yes.
They hired me and went into designing for missile designing and aircraft design.
So you got something from your dad.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Because I used to do drawings for my father while he would be at work. He says, "Continue on here and try and finish it off for me," blah 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 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I did that.
Wow.
And so, oh, well, a time came that I was in the, I finished my schooling, and I was sent back to my outfit, and then my outfit was getting ready to leave, and says they equipped us for combat. So, but the clothing that we received was not for cold weather. It was for tropics. Here we got to the eastern coast, and we're prepared to go overseas. And we wound up in got into one of the big ships, the USS America, West Point, and over 15,000 troops in that ship. We headed for it. It was a hell of a trip. I laid on the cot for 10 days.
My goodness.
I couldn't stand the waves. So anyway, seasickness. So we got to Gibraltar, and we wound up in Marseille, France, and from there Marseille, we wound up in Lyon, France, up to from there on. Then they shipped us to Philipsburg. We got into combat.
Where's Philipsburg?
Philipsburg is almost border to Germany, near the Maginot Line and the Siffric Line. And it's a little town factory, wire factory.
This is between France
and Germany.
and Germany.
Yeah, just near just north of Lyon. And I was assigned to the unit 275th Company B. I was a medic to them. And then I went about doing my duties, follow up the groups that were told to go on a special assignment, and I followed it. No firearms, no nothing. Carried my big duffel bag, which I shouldn't. I should have dropped it. Carried my duffel bag, and everybody used to tell me, said, drop it, we don't need that anymore. And I carried it, and as I went along, when they finished the assignment, and we're heading back, all fire broke loose. Fire
Weapons.
being killing the Germans were really massacring. So finally, and I was able to take care for a lot of the fellas wounded, and suddenly on our way back, I'm not detailing it because it's too long, but anyway, going back, we were heading back for Phillipsburg, and a scout bumped into us and he said, you guys head towards the hill, up the hill. It says Phillipsburg's been taken over by the Germans. So we went up to it. It says the captain has been seriously wounded. The medic has been shot and killed. And since I was the only medic left, so I went up there and he was slaughtered by the Germans. And the captain was still alive, but I mean in a very bad condition, unconscious. And so I continued to prepare him and take care of him. Suddenly, there we laid, we dug in foxholes, and the infantrymen are protecting the hillside, and we had tanks surrounding us that protected us, and our dive bombers were protecting us until finally they weren't able to bomb anymore because the Germans were getting closer and closer and surrounded, and our tanks depleted, ran out of ammunition and all that, and so finally we were caught. And that was on the 2nd day of January. So we had there been from the 1st of January to the 6th of January without food and water. We were out there and we just ate the snow. And
Para engañar el hambre.
yeah, and we were surrounded by the Germans. And so we didn't have any food. We had a white Russian captured, and we gave him what we had, chocolate bar, whatever. So finally, at that time, the Germans started to come up, the commander, and so we had to show the white flag. Our acting commanding officer showed the white flag, and I did everything to banish the sick, the wounded, and so finally the Germans said, okay, you're prisoners of war. And so they made us take out our shoes, our boots off, walk down barefooted on the snow.
That's awful.
Down the hill. And the hill, that hill was rocky, very rocky. And not only rocky, but the snow was up to our waist. It was one of the coldest winters in 100 years, in 50 years. It was about 50 below zero. It was cold. And we were not equipped for the cold weather.
And barefooted to boot.
To boot.
Yes.
So we wound up in a down the hill, and then we marched until we got to the trucks, and then they took us to Bad Orb, Bad Orb, Stalag 9B. We got into Bad Orb, and in groups they took us into these barracks, and those barracks didn't have any heaters or nothing. And at that time, there we laid for a week or so, and while we were lying down, suddenly there was no bunks. We were on the concrete floor, lying down.
No blankets either.
No blankets, no nothing. Just our overcoats.
Uniform, your overcoat.
And when suddenly we heard the chains being unlocked from the door, and suddenly two Germans walk in with the machine guns pointing in many directions, and in behind was a German officer, Gestapo, SS. And
Do you remember his name?
no, and you know, I never knew his name, but looking at him, when we used to see some of the movies back then, before even going over, before getting to the army, before leaving Mexico, we'd see the armies, about how they dressed, the Germans dressed, were the best dressed Germans and soldiers in the world. They were considered, the officers. He was dressed with a black coat, leather coat, down to a little below his knees, with a hat, monocle, and he had a cigarette tip.
Cigarette holder? Yes.
And
Very elegant.
Very elegant, and a baton. And it's just like having an over thing that he had, a cape like, and walked around, and with a baton you could uncover the faces. Some would have their blankets on, and which you carry. Some were lucky to carry a blanket or whatever, and then or cover themselves with a coat, and then went around, and we were all
huddled.
Yeah, we just
Cold.
didn't know what to do, and suddenly he pointed at me.
He knew you.
And it's up. Rouse. I got up, and then he directed me and told the soldiers to direct me to the room. They took me to a room, a table with two chairs. Told the guards
to go away.
Yeah. You didn't even have to say a word. You just and interrogation started.
He waved them away.
And he started to interrogate me. He says, what do you know what's going on behind the lines? I says, as a medic, I don't know what's going on behind the lines. Oh yes, the medics are more intelligent than infantry. He says, they know what they know, what's going on behind. I says, no sir, I never get a chance to go behind the lines. Besides, I have orders to continue on to be with the troops for emergency purposes, to take care of them in wounds. And you lie, boom.
He slapped you.
Slap. Then
he spoke English.
He spoke 7 languages.
7.
He spoke Spanish. Me dijo, sí sabes, cabrón. Yeah, like that. So, you know, the words could come out.
Yes.
And then he said, I says, you live in Pasadena. You were born in San Bernardino, weren't you? I don't know. I know my name, my serial number, and my rank. I don't know nothing else but that. Don't give me that. Boom! You should slap my face again. Then after some interrogation, he started to say, says, your father's an engineer. You was raised in Durango, Mexico. Your parents were kicked out of the United States by the gringos.
He used the word gringos.
Yeah. And he says, you went to prevocacional school, and your father was the director of public works for the state of Durango. And he says, you know the Schrader family, the German Schrader family. So in me started to go, oh my God. It says, there must be a German colony in Durango, and I never knew it. Because I did know the Schrader family.
Yes.
And he was our scoutmaster. That you were his assistant because you knew English and you knew everything about scouts. Because you knew about in the United States the Boy Scouts, huh?
There are many German immigrants in Mexico.
Yeah.
They do have colonias.
Yeah. But at that time you just...
It just dawned on you.
Yeah. And
That's how
everything
they...
he came about and asking me, he hit me with the questions and all that. So then he says, you spied on 2 employees of your father.
And reported them.
Yeah, you reported them, and they were jailed and they were shot.
As traitors.
He says, you know you could be shot too for doing that? I says, I don't know nothing, sir. Yes, you do. Boom! Then they put needles in my fingernails.
What an ordeal.
Then,
and that lasted 3 months.
yeah.
The torture, how about the torture?
Well, that was a torture he did at that time, trying to figure out, I mean, nailing me to the cross in regards to that. So, he let me go. Now, and I went back to the barracks, and the fella saw me that I was bleeding from my hands, and says, "Oh my God!" He says, "What did they do to you?" Blah, and all that. And so I told him, and then I remained there, and then came about around the 8th of February. The commanding officer from the camp called everybody out, and everybody stand out there and says, line up, and all Americans, Jews, step 2 feet forward. So everybody started to yank their ID cards and their
dog
stars.
tags.
They had little stars as their
Officers? Are these the officers?
No, these, because in
The
our
Jewish
camp
people.
there was only no ranks. They were sent to special camps. The guys that had ranks, sergeants and lieutenants, they were in different camps.
I see.
And here we were just only privates and PFCs and whatever. And at that moment, everybody who had like a little star, a metal star, they yanked it and threw it in on the ground, and or it had the star of the Jewish star.
The Star of David.
Davis, and then also, or they had the dog tags with the Hebrew for H. They scratch it and try to make it into a B. Baptist.
I see.
And so, so it turned out that out of 350, about 85, 90 were Jewish. And then the others selected, and they selected me as one of the undesirables because of the spying. So they segregated us totally.
You and the Jewish soldiers.
I went with the Jewish, and we were sent to another barracks, and then 2 days later, 3 days later, we were told that we would be out of the camp. And they left everybody there because our camp was about 65,000, 40,000, 65,000 prisoners of all types, from Americans to Africans to Polish, French, whatever,
English,
Russians. Yeah. And so they sent me, they sent us 350, we were told we're going to another camp, but they glorified us by stating that the camp would be a camp of a much better camp, very suitable. You fellows will enjoy it, and you have a library and a theater, and better to eat, and they glorified us. Well, turned out hell. It was, they sent us to Bergen, Ulster, which was a slave camp, a part of Buchenwald. And it turns out that that it was a camp that had about 11 to 17 tunnels, and those tunnels were being dug out to work it into making big ample rooms to fit and equipped laboratories and test equipment that the Germans scientists were hiding. Here we did not know. But that was the runabout of what it was about.
I see.
And so here in these barracks, the Germans had all our fellas, except the medics. They would go from 6 o'clock in the morning till 6 or 8 in the evening to work on the tunnels, dig out the rocks, dynamite them, and some of them would play tricks to avoid, so that maybe they would be able to kill a German or whatever.
Did any escape?
They couldn't. You couldn't escape. A couple of tried to escape, but they were shot deliberately. And then they told us that they were shot. No, they were captured, and then they were shot. And they shot them. Say that they were shot. They were shot afterwards. What they did is put them on the wall, stand them up against the wall, and shoot them in the forehead with a pistol. And a wooden bullet. They used. The thing would splatter and then it wouldn't go to the back.
It would splatter inside the skull.
Yeah, and then they would wax that hole. They could camouflage that. And I saw that when they used to call me and to verify that look, he attempted to escape, and so he was shot running. So they would show me that the body was had been shot through the back from a distance. well, the bullet went through and it splattered the whole body, you know. But I looked up and tried to look at their face, and he thought that was dumb. But I could tell immediately that there was a fakey little thing that covered up there in the forehead. And yet, when I told them here about it, they wouldn't
believe you.
They wouldn't believe me.
Why not? That was in violation of the rules of war, right?
A violation of rules, and not only that, but the way we were told that we had to sign an affidavit with that.
You would not report it.
We weren't in such thing like what they supposedly said that we.
You were not treated inhumanely. You were supposed to say.
Yeah, and that we were not in a slave camp. Americans were not in a slave camp. We were in a slave camp, part of the Holocaust. But we were there for months on starvation. And then
what did you get to eat there?
Huh?
What did you have to eat there?
What they gave us soup made out of hierbas, weeds that grew out and mixed into, I don't know what they mix. Sometimes they kill a cat or a rat, and they mix it in there, and or make a tea out of the weeds.
So tea and soup.
Tea and soup, and then they would feed us 100 grams of bread made out of sawdust, and we understood they had ground glass, ground sand, and sawdust.
The Germans didn't want you
mixed
to
with
survive.
barley.
They didn't want you to survive.
No, they didn't. As a matter of fact, then
You're a walking miracle. And the people who survived.
Well, 350 of us were wound down to, when we came out of that camp, we come out of that camp with about around 165, about 350.
And you were all skinny, emaciated.
From 148, I went down to 87 pounds.
That's amazing.
And then they put us on a death march when we left the Berga. And that was about 217 miles stretch from Berga to Cam, Germany, where we finally were liberated. Yeah, more or less like this.
Is there a passage that you're looking for?
Here it is.
You want to read it?
It's the route of the death march
Oh, I see.
from Berga to Rotz. This is the from Berga. All that we marked all the way to Camp German.
Let me see if I can get that. Okay, you want to bring it up a little bit? Okay, we got that. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's quite a march.
Yeah,
And-
out of that, very few were able to survive and turn out about, left about pretty close to 120 left. And so little by little, we're down to 20, about 22 left survivors.
That's amazing.
Now, we had to sign an affidavit that we weren't to say nothing about what we went through. Why was the hidden thing is that, from what I understand, is the involvement of the United States government with the famous automobile industry. Ford was involved with Germany, General Motors, Daimler Lee Chrysler, much worse, because that was German made.
Daimler.
And that would be very unjustifiable if we said anything that would jeopardize the government. So that's why we couldn't say nothing. So we had to sign an affidavit, almost signing our lives away. Here we find out that not only that, then it said this would also jeopardize the Americans because the Japanese were involved because the United States was Toshiba, Mitsubishi. They were involved with them.
But they dropped the bomb on Japan.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean nothing. But that we would jeopardize the lives of the Americans if we said anything about it.
I see.
But the thing is that later you find out who did we hire during this time of when we got back here to the United States and got involved in aerospace.
German scientists.
Von Braun,
Yes.
many of the scientists. So I submitted. I had a picture of that magazine. I gave it to CNN, and they were surprised. See, now they they want to go about making the issue of recognition of us going to Orlando, Florida.
Yes. Not Washington, D.C.
And not Washington, D.C. Why? Because they don't want a publicity made of us survivors in Washington to make them embarrassed, or what? Are we going to embarrass them? Insult them? When they insulted us, they humiliated us, we're just being tortured again
That's right.
by the United States government.
And do you have correspondence from the government
No.
about the recognition? How do you know about going to Orlando? They call you on the phone?
Oh, I'll show you some of the write-ups. I don't know if I had them here, but I'll be at the other.
Okay.
I have the Schuster, the Jewish lady that for the involvement in the get together. Well, they want my diary there at the museum.
Well, we can look at that correspondence a little bit later.
Yeah,
And you have some things over at the other table.
yeah.
And-
Anyway, I show you, this is
The armband.
the armband,
Uh-huh.
and
A lot of names
that's
on
the
it.
one that you saw there.
Yes. I interviewed a World War II veteran, and he gave me the photographs from the liberation of Paris. Did you get those?
No,
Those are
no, I didn't get that.
amazing photographs. The photographers are not identified, but I'm thinking about making that part of the collection at the
Really?
University of Texas.
I had a picture taken at the in Paris at the Eiffel Tower, and I never got that picture. I was taking the picture, but I never got the picture.
Mhm.
And this, I made it during the time of the Palm Sunday and just before getting overseas.
Uh-huh.
And this is my the prayer work that I was provided with while then. And
They have seen much wear and tear.
yeah, the book is falling apart, but that's the diary.
Oh. With your drawings and your writing.
And they've all asked me, said, how on earth did you ever get the ink to stay in your pen?
Yeah.
And I had a fountain pen
At the time.
yeah, it was a Schaefer.
Mhm. That was a great pen. I had a Schaefer for a long time also.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, what's his name? Wayne Drash gave me went to the factory
Uh-huh.
and told him about it, and they gave him a fountain pen that he gave me. I put it away.
Very nice. Can we take a little time out?
Sure. Ended us with a little blurb of us four that we were there.
Voices from Delta. Well, I think of it, we belong to the same generation. I consider myself at the tail end of the World War II generation. And most people of the World War II generation who served in the military changed their names. Was your name Antonio at first? Or has it always been Anthony?
It's always been Anthony.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't get to be told Tony until after I got married.
Uh-huh.
You want me to hold it for you?
No, I've got it right here.
Okay.
And it's right next to you. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, my ex-wife, my first wife, didn't believe me what I went through, and I didn't know the traumas that I was going through. I didn't know that I was going to go through this traumas. I didn't understand about the traumas. And now I'm beginning to find out one thing. During World War II, we didn't have suicides like suicides are going on nowadays.
Mhm.
I noticed that, I don't know if you heard today in the news, either shootings, killing their own buddies in Baghdad. What's motivating them? I mean, how worse could that war be as ours was during World War II?
That's right.
where we were so involved.
It was also a very patriotic time, and people were proud to be American.
Today they're not.
And because the country has proven itself to be a sham, the politicians are corrupt, all the big business people
We don't have
are corrupt.
leaders at
That's
all.
right.
Pardon my expression, but would you believe it? I'm saying that even as far as the president, I don't think nothing much of him.
The new president?
Yeah, I don't think much of him. Pardon my expression.
Well, no,
You
you're entitled to your opinion. Everybody is.
I don't see it. And he wants to socialize everything.
Well, see, I think this is the generation of the World War II vet speaking. And I understand your experience because it is very similar to mine. But I have learned a lot by teaching young Mexicanos in my classes that there are generational differences. I was very, very patriotic when I went to Mexico to study at the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. And my Mexican classmates used to say, "Oh, Eliud, your country is corrupt. They keep interfering in Latin America. They're always violating the law." And John F. Kennedy was the president at the time. And then the Bay of Pigs happened.
Yeah.
So I was, but I had been in the military. I served during the Korean War. I was stationed in California. I trained in California. And then I was shipped to Japan, where I was to spend 6 months and then go to Korea. But while I was in Japan, the Korean War ended. So I didn't have to go to Korea. But my younger brother, 1 year younger, was there during the last months before it ended. But we grew up being very American. And we believed in justice and all the good American values that are gone now.
Exactly.
Yes. So I understand perfectly, and the word to socialize something.
Well, I remember then at the time, way back then, Roosevelt wanted to socialize, and turned out that he stopped from socializing the thing that he was going to do.
But he introduced the Social Security Act.
But then the Social Security came in,
Yes.
and that saved the situation. And then he didn't have to socialize the hospitalizations and all that.
But now the doctors charge so much. The pharmacy company, especially the pharmaceutical company. Don't get me started on that. You and I, we get started on that. We'll never cover this material.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, this is very interesting. Let me see if I can go back a little bit about your family, your parents. You've talked about your parents and the memories that you have of your parents, your childhood memories, and the segregated school, elementary school that you went to, which reminded me of it wasn't a segregated school that those Barrio Chicanos went to, but they were not permitted to speak Spanish.
But you notice one thing, I don't know, when we were in here, the difference between California and Texas was when I remember taking a trip to visit my parents by train or by bus. And you would stop at the bus station at El Paso. And the bathrooms had
Colored.
the whites and the blacks.
Colored.
Colored, yeah.
Yes.
And I could go in on the white bathroom like the Americans, but the colored, you had to go to their...
The darker Mexicanos.
No, just had for blacks.
Oh, the colored people.
The colored people, that's all.
Yes. That's true.
And then we weren't designated for that.
there were some places where the Mexicanos were segregated as well in Texas. But that's a very good point that you bring up. There's a geographical as well as a generational difference among Mexicanos. And when you think about Texas and California and compare the experience of Mexicanos, see, the swimming pools in Texas were not segregated, at least not in Austin, whereas here, Mexicanos could only swim the day before they cleaned them out
Yeah.
in Los Angeles. Yes. So, and of course, the black migration of the 1950s changed a lot of things in California. They came out here because there was less discrimination towards black people.
Yes.
But there was still discrimination towards Mexicanos.
Exactly.
Yes. What did your family, your friends, and your neighbors think about your being in the service? When you see, the government deported you, an American born in the United States, to Mexico, and then they went after you to serve because you were American, an American citizen. So how did everybody feel about this? How did you feel about it?
Well, my cousins, you know, there was never a saying. You never heard anything of expression. None of them.
No complaints.
No complaints.
No.
We had no complaints.
People just accepted what
Yeah,
the government
and,
did.
and you know, you didn't see, or a hullabaloo like saying like that. Nothing.
Mhm.
Just go about your business and that was it. But I never heard them, or tapping you somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, or because you're going on a bus and you're a Mexican. Sometimes they couldn't tell whether I was a Mexican or American because
Yeah,
I didn't look like one.
Uh-huh. Yes, and that makes a big difference in places. I have been to many places in the United
Turn red.
States. It's turning red? Okay. Let's see how much time we have. Okay. It's still going. So, but I was going to say, commenting on what you just said, that I have been in many parts of the United States where they have never seen Mexicanos. So they don't have stereotypes of us.
No.
See? And because I was an educated Mexicano, they had a favorable impression of me. See?
Like yesterday and the day before yesterday, I went to the yearly. There's an anniversary get together of the 70th Infantry Division, and this time it was at Palm Springs, and when they saw me, my God, like they said, I saw an idol. They said, Tony, we're so glad to see you. And they heard about everything, what had happened or transpired with time was. And I was surprised. I mean, the women come to me and hug me, and God Almighty, the fellas, everybody. And they thought of me as another part of them.
Yes.
And they saw my wife, and Maria, and they loved her. They kissed her. She's incapacitated. She can't walk because of the deterioration of her spine.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a day before yesterday, it was Friday, and it was great. They loved her and all that, and the comments, nothing that's be against it.
And yet, young people nowadays don't realize that at one time Mexican was a dirty word.
Oh yes.
Like Chicano was
Yes.
a dirty word. But the Chicano movement, I've been teaching for a long time, and I learned a lot. The Chicano movement made it respectable to be Mexican or to be Chicano. And now we have people involved in all the arts, intellectual life, write books?
Well, would you believe it? I traced the family tree of the Acevedos. And there is something very conjugal about it. And just to show you, let me show you. Oh, it's not.
Maybe it's on the table
No,
in
it's
the kitchen?
It's the. Oh my God, where did it go? Where did she name that many years back?
Reagan's Ranch.
Yeah, way back up there by Napa, Sonoma.
Yeah.
That Acevedo Range. There's a name on that name about it. That was part of our
Inheritance.
inheritance.
That's
Wow.
amazing. Yeah.
We can't claim it anymore because it was too late. My father was telling me about it, and the one that told me to not say a word was my brother-in-law that worked for John Wayne Productions. I had a brother-in-law that worked for John Wayne Productions that filmed the Nights of the Iguana. He did the filming in Nayarit. Isn't that amazing?
That is really amazing. See, and that's another difference, geographical difference between Texas, New Mexico, California, and Colorado.
In Colorado.
See, in New Mexico, the land grant became very important.
And I have some write-ups against the Treaty of Guadalupe.
Yes,
And see, you show this to anyone, and they said they wouldn't believe it.
that's right. I'm going to take a picture of your books there.
Oh, there's two books. This one was written by Roger Cohen.
Soldiers and Slaves. Okay.
And the other one was written by Flint Whitlock, historian of the World War II magazine.
Very good. And I see a lot of books over there. Are they all about World War II?
No, they have a dictionary and what's his name? Tom Brokaw.
Oh, yes.
And that's it, but nothing.
Okay.
But I have certificates given to me by awards.